Okay, here we are, still in EU turn 15, beginning of period 3. Diplomatic phase, no big movements here. We see Spain gained Savoy in subsidies box. There was some attempts, the French tried to grab Scotland away, the English could oppose that. The English were playing for Savoy as well because they're worried about France. Let me think who else. The Netherlands played for Hesse, but they didn't get them. And I guess that's about it. Turkey didn't have enough cash. Russia doesn't want to waste money on this. Russia did, though, spend a lot of their stability. And they declared war on Kazan and Siberia. And as far as I'm concerned, this is what they pretty much have to do. They have no casus belli against any of these. It struck me as kind of odd. It feels like Russia should just, be this sort of beast they can move towards these, but no. So they had to pay 10 victory points. Now they'll probably get them back. With this, it's a complete conquest. And similarly with Siberia. So they will get those points back if they succeed in those complete conquests. And they really want to turn these around this turn. Of course, they're only going to get one stability back. Paying 4 for the attacks is a painful solution, but they need to move quickly. Siberia, they want to be able to expand and build their colonies eastward. And with Kazan, well, they need to grab Kazan, Steeps, and Astrakhan, as well as Siberia, before the end of the period in order to meet their goals. And they're also going to want to, be in a strong position to face, say, the Crimea or Poland if they have to. They're expecting some events along those lines. All right, on to the economic crap. I already rolled prices. Nothing really changed. I've got sort of fixed values so that I can easily compute, but I can easily glance at and see what the Portuguese are producing. Right now, they've just broken the barrier where they would get the Indies fleet. Normally that happens last period. They'll have a couple of turns where they get that big, $50 or $100 or whatever for sailing, and they're not getting that. They didn't get that, and now it doesn't really matter until somebody takes it away from them. If somebody gets more spices and products of the Orient than they're producing. But right now they're cranking out this full amount here, the 11, that's all them. Okay, this is not covered in the Risto events here that I can find. In particular, I'm trying to figure out when the Treaty of Tordesillas ends. According to the base rules, I have that it ends here. The 1560, essentially right there, and Treaty of Tordesillas. I'm going to trust that. I wrote those down when I was a cleverer person. So that means the long-term effects are gone, and it makes sense. Portugal's no longer in the game, so they can't really patrol it. And this is the period where France and England start getting colonial abilities. So anyway, I finished the income phase. Nobody, of course, got the income for the Dutch provinces, but the Dutch got all the collateral income. And that collateral income ended up being quite a pile. $361, more than Spain made. Spain made $277. Of course, they've got another $140 in the bank back here on those gold transports. But they got a possible problem here. They have to decide how they're going to ship their gold. Because if they start the revolt, the Dutch can build a privateer. Of course, they don't know how to get to the Spaniards yet. So that's kind of safe right now. But in the future, it may be a risk for them to be at war with the Dutch. And you'll see the sea beggars being a real threat to the Spanish gold. Working over here on the income phase, on the administrative phase, I realize England kind of screwed up. They raised their FTI to 5. They're only allowed a 3. And that could go up to 4 with the East India Company. 5 doesn't happen until 1665. They've got a couple more periods before they're safe. Well, they're increasing their DTI, but, I thought they were jumping up to a higher level on this range. 5 is the maximum you can have anyway. So they're playing things risky, and as soon as a revolt happens, they could see some devastating effects to their income. Anyway, meanwhile, they used their free colonization up here in America. That didn't work. They had explored that, but didn't have enough bonuses. They're using their explorer to boost their chances here, which did work, and they got one there. They got a monopoly over there. Just strengthening their position economically so that they're able to expand more quickly. They've still got a pile of money. They raised their navy rather than their infantry. The army they didn't want to raise because it's going to get boosted by 1 for free because it's lagged behind the base value for the Latins. Let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think the French should be about here with the Spaniards. They should have made it up further. They're going to have to pay to boost themselves over that barrier, though. Okay, well, we finished up the administrative stuff. And I had some French here who should have died long ago. I just forgot to use their explorers. Hopefully I'll use them now. All they've got is an explorer. They lost Roberval as well. Anyway, no big net effect here. The Spanish are building up their army because they're going to have to deal with not only the Dutch revolt, but they want to take the Incas out. Remember, this was the turn they were considering doing it, but they just don't have the cash. They're really starved. Yes, they could have taken some loans out. By the way, I found a couple of loans that I should have dismissed last turn, it being the end of the period. I took care of that, so Turkey and France were able to get rid of some national loans. This is sort of a freebie thing. If you have a national loan at the end of a period, you can just dismiss it and it goes away without much problem at all. That's really a potent ability. Some rolls for reinforcements. We see Kazan stiffened a tiny bit for Siberia. The biggie, though, are the Habsburgs. Turkey's going to have a hard time facing them now and may have to try to get out of this as best they can. It's one of the problems with Turkey is that they're facing a minor. They would love to see the Dutch end up in charge of Austria instead, because it's just so much easier to face an enemy power. I find that a really disturbing factor in the game. It's especially the case with the big powers. I mean, obviously, no matter what, a small power is going to have trouble facing anyone, no matter how you cut it. So, hey, who's this guy? No. I know somebody's kicking around here who's got 2 sides. Is there any? Yeah, let's give ourselves another Austrian leader. He's a Hungarian leader. There's no Hungarian neutral, so he actually goes over to that. And I gotta figure out where he's gonna go because he's pretty good. Looks like he'll have this stack. And I will give him this little siege monster here to help him. I think the Turks are in a lot of trouble here. And, they just haven't been able to fire on all gears in this game. Alright, well, we'll see how things turn out. The Dutch started competing with the English in England. That's not going very well. England's got those really high boosted rates. Well, they sure do help England survive commercial attacks. Biggest issue, though, is the Dutch don't have anyone to turn to. They don't have a natural ally. There's no Protestant power willing to support them. This may be a game where the Dutch fail, and it's cool that I have the Risto events that allow them to switch over to the Habsburgs, if that's the case. Alright, into the play. And right away we see the problem with Russia. First of all, and this was particularly a bad occurrence, but they're going to run into problems like this. First of all, they couldn't find their way into Siberia and took 50% losses trying to discover it with an army. Great. Then they went in to hit the Kazan, and remember, the Russians don't have an advantage over these miners. Now, they're facing a 1-hex miner. You'd think, you just got to clear them out. Bang. Well, they got some bad luck here. First of all, the miner has a really good leader with a 4 firepower and a 4 shock value. And Kurbsky is decent, but he's got worse shock. Well, the firepower round, they're at even ratings, so they're rolling on the C table. Neither one did any damage. The shock round, Kazan rolled very, very well. Russians didn't. 75% losses. That big +2 on there. 3 stars that routs the Russian army. And then a pursuit, another 30% loss. Then another 50% loss to the Russian army on withdrawal. There's almost nothing left. I mean, they have like the equivalent of a couple of detachments. They're keeping an army so that they have the artillery. But now the Kazan can come back and start conquering Russian territory. And that can be a serious, serious problem. Russia could just die on the vine in this game, essentially. And I've seen this happen. All right. So the Spaniards shift some troops up into Flanders, or whatever's actually there. I think it may be Flanders. Preparing to move into the Netherlands and instigate this crisis. They've got, this fleet is nominally split because it allows Santa Cruz to sail up. He's got better ratings. Actually, this guy's got better ratings. I could have used him for this. And in fact, I think I will. But it's still nominally split. But when he comes back, yeah, he's still better. So I can use him for the making it into the New World as well. Just, you want that better maneuver rating when you're transporting troops especially. But he's building up a Spanish army here to deliver and put into position for the Incas. Now, the Habsburgs, they see the difficulty in attacking. Good old Zerini here had not the largest Austrian army, but he's their best leader. He crossed across to Banat over the rivers, and Peklavan Khan destroyed his army. So now the Austrians are down to 2 armies. You know, that it's really, really tough. Now, like I said, there's an advantage to the miners, but it's really tough to fight in this riverland. You're crossing rivers and you're getting those big penalties, and even though the Habsburgs have the technological edge right now, because Latin's technology has been boosted to here because of the Dutch, whereas the Turks are still back down in the medieval era, well, Renaissance, the Turks were still able to do much more damage and just destroy the army. Good die roll? Yeah, a little bit, but not terribly. Modifiers, etc. came into play there. Alright. And we finish things off for this round with the French making their way down here, exploring South Carolina. Well, the Carolina region. The whole sort of deep south of the U.S. seaboard, which they can barely reach there. They already had explored this, so they didn't want to land in the Americas, even though that's a more valuable area. They can always, you know, pick up later. They're more interested really in the Caribbean islands, although that could put them in a collision course with Spain again. And then over here, well, the Turks actually did pretty well. They slipped into Pex without Franz Joseph being able to take them on, and they've gotten some good siege die rolls. So there's actually the possibility they might get the big turn that they need to get a peace with the Habsburgs. And if they can get a couple province off them, they'll just, you know, praise Allah and be happy with that. Well, cut short again. 2 rounds, bang, I roll a 1, it's over. Spaniards haven't been able to get their forces into the New World. I forgot to roll for this, but they have violated the Dutch, so at least that is forced to happen. I'm sure they've succeeded there. That's 10 plus 9. In fact, it's guaranteed. So they get rid of that little revolt, which in the end only really helps the Dutch rather than anything else, because the Dutch are going to have to deal with all these revolts within their revolt. What they're doing is destabilizing their own territory, so they're not going to get a lot of income off of the territory that's in revolt, and they have to kind of quell that. It's pro-Spanish revolts when it comes into their hands. But they didn't manage to get their forces over. The French and English, neither of them are too unhappy because their fleets got they lost their explorers in both cases. The English deciding to head down towards Africa, the French going into the Caribbean. Neither one was terribly successful. Bad move here. The Turks managed to move the Algerians into here against the Spaniards. And they're going to be able to sink some Spanish merchants because of that. The Spanish didn't move the knights into play. Had they done so, the Turks would have been able to slide down and affect them. But over here, it's not good at all for the Turks. They got pushed back out of Pex. They failed to take Zagreb, and they got bounced in Ruthenia. Then with the Russians, well, they're down to one army. They kind of cut the Kazan army back, but they made additional attacks and lost their extra army that way. They're not too unhappy to see the round end. It wasn't going terribly well for them, but they would have liked, I don't know. I mean, there's just no good answer when your army's destroyed. So getting a chance to rebuild the army and not have Moscow fall is probably overall for the best for the Russians. Anyway, I've got to take care of all that administrative crap. And the next turn, if you remember, we have 30 Years' War erupting way early. That should, when you start using up events like that out of the future, you kind of wonder what's going to happen during this long period here. And that's a good question. There's a reason that the pace and cycle of European actions happened as it did. There's this recovery cycle, which happens in the game. So we're going to have to make our own wars, basically. And that'll happen, I'm sure. But the game does provide you with events that kind of, even if you're very, very pacifistic like I am in this kind of game, because fighting a war is kind of difficult, and if you tinker the rules a little bit, it becomes not terribly advantageous. It's still painful. Like I said, it costs you 5 victory points to declare war on a minor, yet when you swamp one, you get 10 victory points. So there's 5 cheap victory points. And the economics of it mean that you can break even with it. So a lot of players will, from what I understand, hunt victory points this way, just picking, So poor Lorraine gets invaded every turn by France and taken over, and wow, France gains 5 victory points a turn. I don't like that one bit. It probably won't help the countries that need the help the most, things like Russia and Turkey, who just can't find someone to attack. Of course, Turkey could, constantly bash on Moldavia, and it's completely ahistorical. So, it's kind of, why are you playing EU? This unbalanced game that's trying very hard to capture the essence of the history. Why is this the game that you play if you're going to hunt victory points like that? Go, I don't know. I mean, it feels to me like in that kind of circumstance you should be playing Struggle of Empires, something ahistorical that's all about victory points. This isn't a Euro, folks. This is, something that's more for the experience than that. Anyway, those are my views on it. I understand I'm probably in the minority of people who actually play this game. At least opposed. Looking at the Dutch, I flipped over these revolt markers. I'm realizing this is not how I normally play. Some things are kind of in the air, but I think, and I'm pretty sure I play this way, when a manufactory has a revolt on it, or when a trade center has a revolt on it, I don't give the cash for that, and I gave it to them this turn. We'll forgive them that. But next turn they're not going to get that, and that's going to make things a lot harder on them. Actually, let's see what they... Yeah, see, I spent a lot of money on rolls on things, so I may just limit their capital or something. Anyway, they got a little bit of a bump off of it, but from now on they're going to have to cope with the fact that they've got those revolts and quell them. Anyway, onward. Well, we pushed things into turn 16 there, and got a few... This guy's not going to come back because there's a hetman to replace him. Gotta figure out where the hell he put him. So, we're already seeing the problem of Russia, the sink. They lost 20 victory points this turn. 10 for the 2 declarations of war, 10 for their failures, their not getting stability bonuses, etc. This is not unusual. It's really, really tough, from my recollection, for Russia to come out positive on any turns. And a third of the game, they got to play Portugal. They're way in the lead here. 550 points. When most of the people are not doing too well. England's at under 200. Venice is at 300. It seems like, yeah, they can take this hit. But no, it just keeps on paying out. It just keeps on hurting. And unless this game changes that significantly, and I'm not seeing it, because quite frankly, bad die rolls are going to happen, and there's the Russian times of trouble ahead, and there's the fact that they're always going to be weaker than Poland because they can't force Poland to surrender. Same thing that's happening here with the Habsburgs in Turkey. Turkey couldn't get a peace. They needed a 6 or more to get a white peace. They can't get it. And it doesn't hurt Spain or the Habsburgs one little bit, but it hurts Turkey. It hurts Turkey because they can't do anything anywhere else. It's gonna, it's another turn's delay. They're not going to be able to do much better when they finally do get a peace because their stability's crashing. Eventually, they're going to have to request a peace where they're giving stuff up just because they can't handle the war. And that's, that's one of the flaws to the game from my point of view, is that the minors are too potent. And it's one of the things I was hoping EU8 would solve if I can get my hands ever on, the rules and enough fixes to my game to make it work, is that, at least it makes Poland a major power. It makes Austria a major power earlier in the game. It makes these things happen in ways that you don't have these deadly minors that are just able to dominate the world. I mean, I've seen Poland expand enough outside their area that they get all the dissolution of Poland events and still exist in little clumps here, there, and everywhere. I remember a Poland that was sitting in 3 separate sections on the board in one of my games. I could pull out the map and try to find it, but I have, colorings of the maps. Anyway. But I'm griping on it, but, I love the game anyway. All right, up it goes.